The Gatharn Empire's flagship hovered in deep space, its sleek hull shimmering with energy fields as hundreds of smaller vessels orbited like predators circling prey. On the command deck, General Xylar stood tall, his 6 crimson eyes fixated on a holographic projection of the approaching human ship. The image flickered, revealing a clunky, blocky craft with dull, scratched metal panels and visibly outdated propulsion systems. "What is this abomination?" Xylar scoffed, his deep voice carrying both amusement and disdain. He gestured toward the projection with one of his clawed hands. "This is humanity's attempt to challenge us. A flying coffin? Laughable." The room erupted in chuckles from his officers. Their advanced tactical computers had already scanned the vessel. Its weapon systems were rudimentary by Gatharn standards, relying on projectile-based cannons and basic energy shielding that wouldn't last 5 seconds against even the smallest Gatharn fighter. Primitive thrusters, inefficient design, and barely functional armor plating, one officer reported, struggling to contain his laughter. "This craft wouldn't have been acceptable in our fleet 10,000 cycles ago." Xylar grinned, baring rows of serrated teeth. "Humanity's desperation is pitiable. They dare send this wreck into our space. Perhaps they think we'll spare them out of pity." Another officer chimed in, pointing to a data spike on the sensors. "General, the ship is on an unorthodox approach vector. It's erratic, almost as if the pilot is unfamiliar with basic navigational protocols. Their trajectory suggests either incompetence or an act of sheer desperation." Xylar waved the comment aside. "Let them come. We'll let their warriors see what true power looks like before we vaporize them." Despite the overwhelming confidence, a subtle anomaly lingered on the holographic display. The human vessel's energy output fluctuated unpredictably, as though it were hiding something beneath its crude exterior. One junior officer hesitated before speaking up. "General, the energy readings are inconsistent." "There's enough," Xylar barked, slamming a clawed fist onto the console. "This ship is nothing more than a relic of a dying species. Prepare a fighter wing to intercept and destroy it. Do not waste my time with irrelevant details." The officers obeyed, issuing commands to the fleet. Sleek, Gatharn fighters shot forward, their movements fluid and precise as they closed in on the human ship. Yet, as they approached, a strange unease settled over the command deck. The ship didn't slow. It didn't veer off course or attempt evasive maneuvers, as most would when confronted with superior forces. Instead, it barreled forward with reckless determination, as if daring the Gatharn fleet to engage it head-on. Xylar narrowed his eyes, his amusement giving way to a flicker of irritation. "So, they choose to die with bravado. Let's grant them their wish. Destroy it." As the first wave of Gatharn fighters descended on the human vessel, the crew on the flagship prepared to enjoy the spectacle of its destruction. Yet, in the pit of his stomach, Xylar felt an unfamiliar sensation, an inkling of doubt he couldn't quite explain. The human ship tore through the Gatharn fighter wing with alarming precision, its crude appearance betraying the sheer skill of the pilot inside. The vessel rolled and weaved between enemy fire, its movements so fluid and calculated that it defied its clunky design. Gatharn plasma blasts skimmed the hull but failed to connect, each near hit followed by a sharp counterattack. Projectile cannons fired in quick succession, and to the shock of the watching officers, the human ship landed critical hits with every shot. Inside the Gatharn flagship, the mood shifted rapidly. What had begun as smug confidence was now tinged with confusion and unease. General Xylar watched in growing frustration as his fighters struggled to land a single clean hit on the primitive ship. Every engagement ended the same way, human fire disabling or outright destroying Gatharn ships. The human pilot anticipated every maneuver, staying one step ahead of the attackers. "What's happening out there?" Xylar barked, his claws digging into the armrests of his command chair. "Are they malfunctioning? How is this thing outmaneuvering our elite forces?" An officer frantically analyzed the battle, sweat glistening on his pale scales. "General, their weapons may be primitive, but the precision, the pilot is exploiting every weak point in our formations. It's as if they've studied us for cycles." "That's impossible," Xylar snapped, though his confidence wavered. No human possesses that level of tactical awareness. It's luck, nothing more. But luck didn't explain what was unfolding. The human ship began targeting larger vessels, darting through their defensive screens and disabling key systems with pinpoint accuracy. With each attack, the human pilot displayed an uncanny understanding of Gatharn strategies, adapting to their patterns faster than the officers could compensate. "General," another officer stammered, "the pilot's movements, they're not erratic. They're deliberate. It's as if they're taunting us." Xylar snarled, his temper flaring. "Enough. Deploy the cruisers. Box them in and eliminate them. I won't tolerate this humiliation any longer." The order was given, and several Gatharn cruisers moved to intercept the human vessel. Their shields activated, and massive plasma batteries began firing in unison, creating a web of destruction the human ship couldn't possibly avoid. Yet, against all logic, the pilot danced through the chaos, their maneuvers impossibly precise. The ship darted close to the cruisers, forcing them to hesitate for fear of hitting their own fleet. Then came the counterattack. The human ship unleashed a barrage of projectiles at key points along the cruisers' hulls, targeting engines, weapon systems, and shield generators. One by one, the cruisers were crippled, their advanced technology rendered useless by the relentless onslaught. Inside the flagship, silence fell as the officers watched their fleet falter against a single human ship. General Xylar's 6 eyes burned with fury, but beneath the anger was something he hadn't felt in cycles: fear. For the first time, the Gatharn commander realized that this wasn't a battle against primitive technology. This was a battle against a force they hadn't prepared for. The battle intensified as the human ship turned its attention to the Gatharn flagship. Its clunky hull was now unmistakably a beacon of defiance, cutting through the void with relentless purpose. Every movement, every shot, was calculated to sow chaos and disrupt the Gatharn fleet's cohesion. The ship closed the distance with unnerving confidence, ignoring the desperate volleys of plasma fire that streaked past it. Inside the flagship, panic rippled through the command deck as alarms blared and damage reports piled up. "General, they're targeting us directly," an officer yelled, his voice cracking under the pressure. "Our defensive systems can't keep up with their tactics." "Impossible," Xylar growled, though his voice was quieter now, tinged with disbelief. "It's just one ship. Deploy all available fighters. I want them crush." Dozens of Gatharn fighters surged toward the human vessel, their weapons lighting up the darkness of space. The human pilot responded with ruthless efficiency, maneuvering in ways that should have been impossible for a ship of its design. It twisted and rolled, using the enemy's own formation against them, forcing them into crossfire. Fighter after fighter fell, consumed by the chaos the lone pilot orchestrated. The human ship then executed a daring move, skimming dangerously close to the flagship's hull. Its projectiles tore into the external defenses, disabling turret after turret with surgical precision. The Gatharn crew scrambled to adapt, but the pilot's tactics were too unconventional, too unpredictable. It was as if they anticipated every countermeasure before it was even deployed. "General, we've lost half our fighters," another officer shouted, desperation creeping into their voice. "Our shields are weakening. This isn't just a pilot. This is..." They trailed off, unable to articulate the growing dread that gripped the crew. Xylar slammed his clawed hand onto the console, his composure slipping. "Enough. This ends now. Activate the ion barrier. Let's see them maneuver through that." The ion barrier was a last resort weapon, designed to trap and disable enemy ships within a field of electromagnetic chaos. It activated with a hum that resonated through the flagship, surrounding the human ship in a shimmering cage of destructive energy. The Gatharn officers watched with grim satisfaction as the human vessel appeared to falter, its movements slowing as the barrier took hold. But what happened next shattered their confidence entirely. Instead of retreating, the human ship accelerated, plunging deeper into the barrier. Sparks danced across its hull, but the ship held together, its trajectory unwavering. Inside the Gatharn command deck, the officers stared in disbelief. "They're using the barrier against us," one officer whispered. "They're redirecting the energy, channeling it back into their systems." Xylar's eyes widened as he realized the truth. The pilot wasn't just surviving the barrier, they were using it as a weapon. The human ship emerged from the field, its weapons systems glowing with newfound intensity. With a single, devastating salvo, it unleashed a barrage that bypassed the flagship's weakened shields, striking critical systems. The flagship shuddered violently as explosions rippled through its hull. The once mighty vessel, the pride of the Gatharn fleet, was now crippled. Xylar slumped in his chair, staring at the displays with hollow disbelief. This wasn't just a loss. It was a message. As the Gatharn flagship drifted, its systems failing and fires raging across its decks, the human ship slowed to a halt directly in front of it. The once dismissive laughter and arrogance on the command deck had been replaced by a suffocating silence. Every officer, every crew member, stared at the screen in dread as the human vessel's weapons charged again, its silhouette stark against the void. The reality of their defeat was now undeniable, yet they were still grasping for an explanation. General Xylar rose from his seat, his movements slow and deliberate. The proud and commanding presence he once exuded had crumbled, replaced by the hollow acknowledgement of a superior adversary. He stared at the screen, his gaze locked on the human ship. It wasn't just the technology, it wasn't just the tactics. There was something more. Something terrifying. A communication signal flashed across the Gatharn monitors, a direct broadcast from the human ship. The officers hesitated, exchanging uneasy glances. Xylar nodded grimly, giving permission to open the channel. The display flickered, and for the first time, the Gatharns saw their adversary. It wasn't the advanced AI they had hypothesized, nor some alien mercenary species hired by the humans. It was a lone human pilot, clad in a standard Earth flight suit, their expression calm but steely. The sight was almost anticlimactic in its simplicity, yet it carried an undeniable weight. "You thought we were weak," the pilot said, their voice steady and unyielding. "You thought we'd fall, like all the others you've conquered. You underestimated us. And now you've paid the price." The words hit harder than any projectile. The Gatharns, a species that had prided themselves on their dominance, were being lectured by a species they had mocked as primitive. Yet, there was no gloating in the pilot's tone, no cruelty, only a quiet, unwavering determination that spoke volumes. Xylar clenched his claws, his pride warring with the cold reality before him. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice low and strained. The pilot's gaze didn't waver. "I'm humanity. And this is your warning. Don't come back." With that, the communication ended. The human ship powered up its engines, moving past the crippled flagship without firing another shot. The remaining Gatharn vessels, their morale shattered, began retreating in disarray. The human ship didn't pursue. It didn't need to. Its message had been delivered. As the Gatharn fleet fled the system, Xylar stood in silence, watching the human vessel grow smaller on the screen. He had underestimated them, and it had cost him everything. Humanity wasn't just another conquest, they were something far more dangerous. They were survivors. Back on Earth, the pilot returned to their base, greeted not by fanfare but by quiet acknowledgement. Their mission had been clear: protect their world, prove their resilience, and remind the galaxy that humanity would not be so easily conquered. The human ship, battered but triumphant, came to rest in its hangar. It was a relic by galactic standards, but today, it had shown that spirit, ingenuity, and willpower could outmatch even the most advanced technology. And as the pilot stepped down, their gaze turned skyward once more, knowing the universe had just been given a reason to think twice.